film. Let me grab your
My bio?
bio. I don't want to take any more time than I have to because I want to really turn it over to John. I should have got you a water. You got water?
I've actually got one, yeah.
Okay.
I'm good.
Totally forgot that. But John's had a really great career, worked on great movies, and he's an amazing animator. If you're ever interested, look up the IMDb, John Pomeroy, tons and tons of stuff. So just briefly, I want to introduce him. I also wanted to say his wife Cammie is here, and his business partner,
Phil Ernest?
Phil Ernest, and
One of my crew, Trey Bailey.
yeah, so
Yes.
they're here with us, so it's great. Thank you for coming. So there's kind of a twofold presentation because John came here to lecture about animation. He's been doing class critiques, but he also has a painting show, a solo painting show over in the Atrium Gallery. And he's going to talk about the artwork here tonight.
Yep.
And but just quickly, I'll read his bio if you haven't already seen it. John Pomeroy is an American animator, producer, writer, storyboard artist, character designer, and painter. So he's really
Wow.
got the force on that. His work there. He has worked for Walt Disney Studios, as well as Don Bluth Studios in Ireland. He was mentored, and very few people can say this, like maybe just a handful can say they were mentored under famed animator Frank Thomas. So Frank Thomas was one of Walt Disney's 9 old men. You've heard that phrase. And they animated everything from Snow White clear up into the early 80s, right? It was one of their last films. John's career spans between the end of the golden age of animation to today's current feature-length animated films. He started his animation career in 1973 and has worked on, listen to this, animated films such as Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Rescuers, Pete's Dragon, Banjo the Woodpile Cat, The Fox and the Hound, The Secret of Nim, Dragon's Lair, An American Tale, Land Before Time, Pocahontas, Fantasia 2000, Atlantis, The Lost Empire, Treasure Planet, Curious George, the movie that came out last year, Klaus. He worked on that. Yes. It was a groundbreaking film in animation. It was hand-drawn digitally, but just the way the final rendering was amazing. That John worked on that. He also worked on the Simpsons movie. He has been a supervising or directing animator for over a dozen feature film characters. Not many people can say that. His most recent works have been centered on book illustration, which he's going to share with you tonight, right?
Yes.
So please join me with a warm welcome for John Pomeroy.
Reciting my resume, even hearing it wears me out. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. One of the things I would like to also do towards the end of our program here tonight is I want to give you a sneak preview of the tutorial series that my partner Phil Ernest and I, and Trey and Cammie, have been working on for the last 2 years, called Pomeroy Art Academy. So we're just going to show you a little snippet. We've never shown this to anybody, and you will be the first sets of eyes to see this tutorial.
John, real quick, can everybody hear John in the back? Just want to make sure that everybody.
You okay? Yep.
Okay,
Hey. He's kind of walked through, the almost 50 years career. God, I don't feel that old. Jeez. Starting with, working with Frank Thomas and Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2 and getting to know the 9 old men and working with most of them was just not only a dream come true, but you have to say it's almost like an act of God to be able to be at just the right time and the right place. Like I was telling Brad earlier, if I had come even a few weeks earlier or a few weeks later, I would have been swept away in production on Robin Hood because they were making the big effort to finish that production in the last 2 or 3 months. But instead, I went on to animation trainee, and then after 4 months, I was promoted to animator and got to work on Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. So it was like, these things just don't happen. So I have a lot to be thankful for. Getting to meet Don Bluth and Gary Goldman became a part of my life, and we joined together in a partnership when we started our own company, and then worked on Secret of NIMH, the arcade games Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, An American Tale, and Land Before Time with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. So it's been a wild and zany ride, and it's getting even wilder because now I'm actually working with Warner Brothers on Looney Tunes, and I'm actually working on scenes of characters that I grew up with when I was 8 and 9 years old: Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Elmer Fudd, and Yosemite Sam. So it's a terrific art form, and I've got a lot to be thankful for. One of the things about this art form that's interesting is that the longevity of it is like, it's not like pro basketball or pro football or being a ballerina or a dancer or an even actor sometimes. It has great longevity. And I remember getting to meet Grim Natwick, who was an animator of 101 years old, and he basically died at his animation board, I think. He was working on Betty Boop back in 1931. Ollie Johnson told me, Grim Natwick, I remember him. He was old when I started here in 1933. He was working on Betty Boop, and they recruited, Walt recruited him from, I think, Max Fleischer Studios back in 34 to work on the early development of Snow White. And Grim Natwick became one of the animators that did the character of Snow White. So, I mean, this is a man who was in the industry for over 80 years, maybe 85. I think he started when he was 14 or 15. So, amazing longevity. And the timing for you as animation students is terrific because you can work in digital animation and you can work in 2D animation also, because there seems to be a resurgence that's going on right now. About 2013, I was approached by Wendy Lefkon of Disney Publishing in New York. And she came to me and she asked, would you be interested in illustrating, because I'm a painter, I still like painting, would you be interested in illustrating a book on Walt Disney? And I said, are you kidding? Absolutely, what an honor. And she said, yeah, we got your name from a friend of yours. And I said, who? Glenn Keane, because we approached him first about doing the illustrations for this book. And he says, no, the guy you want for this job is John Pomeroy. And Glenn sent them a print of a commemorative print that I did back in 2000 of Walt Disney. It was a commemorative 45th anniversary of the opening of Disneyland Park in Anaheim, California. And Glenn sent them a photograph of this print. And they said, well, yeah, that's the guy that we want to do this. So they approached me, and it took about 2 years to finally get the script finalized. The creation of this book, Walt's Imagination, very much resembled the animation process, being that the script had to be approved, then there was a storyboard process that had to be approved, pencil layouts, color comps, which is the art direction of the book, its identity, and then the final paintings. And each one of these steps had to have an approval. So, I mean, it was a 5-year project. So I think I had to wait a couple of years. I think I finally started first pencils in, 2014, 2015? Just approaching it as story sketches, little tiny thumbnail sketches that I would send. I sent maybe around 30, 35 of them to their office in New York, and they looked at them, reviewed them, and then they came out with their final approval of 13 different moments that the book would describe in the text. Now, the text was written by Doreen Rappaport. She did a series with Disney Publishing called Big Words Books. They've done Martin Luther King, they've done Abraham Lincoln, they've done John Lennon, they've done Helen Keller, Eleanor Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, and now Walt Disney. And so this was an important work because this is Disney Publishing doing a bio for children of their founder, Walt Disney himself. So the fact that I got picked, as an animator with Disney, as a story person with Disney to do this work was terrific. It's one of the few, it's the only publication I know of that's in this series of 12 books where the illustrator is actually painting the figures in the book that he worked with. Some of the people that are pictured in this book I actually got to work with. Joe Grant, who was a story man, he was a sequence director on Dumbo, and I think a sequence director on Pinocchio back in the 40s. He left right after the war and started his own greeting card company, and then came back later working on Little Mermaid. I got to work with him on Pocahontas. And then there's Ken Anderson, who was a storyboard artist, layout artist, art director, character designer for years. And I got to work with him on Pete's Dragon and Rescuers. So it was a great, great connection here that I actually had with this book. And on the very back side of the book, there's a little dedication to one of my, he's not a mentor, but he was certainly wonderful to work with, Roy Disney. And Roy shared stories with me about his uncle, stories about Pinocchio and stories when he was working as a fledgling sequence director growing up there on the Disney lot. So going back to the development of the book, once I got the story sketches approved, then we went into, what's the first slide here? Then we got into more detailed layouts. Now, let's show the first 3 or 4 panels. So I think these are the story sketches. So it describes Walt's life on Marceline, Missouri on his farm, what it was like. Here's a sketch of him and his brother trudging through the snow when they lived in Kansas City. His father was a great relationship with his dad. Here, this is a sketch of him and his friend Walt Pfeiffer when they were like doing talent shows. They would dress up like Charlie Chaplin. Here he is, quick sketch of back from his, he did year-long duty in the American Red Cross over in France following World War I. He's looking at sketches at an exhibition on Edward Muybridge, Humans in Motion, and he's looking at these walk cycles, he's looking at a zoetrope, and he's getting enamored of the idea, the top right sketch there, he's starting to think about in terms of animation, because he was involved with comic strips. He loved comic strips. He was doing comics and artwork for the Kansas City ad agency, and so he's now getting drawn to the art form of. What's the next panel? So this sketch, the top left, shows him arriving in Los Angeles. I think he's staying with his brother Roy Sr., and he's looking at this garage as a place where he can set up his equipment and start working on maybe his first cartoons. Bottom left is him daydreaming while he's working at the Kansas City ad agency, and this is where he met his fellow animator, Ub Iwerks, where he would have a very strong relationship, and in the creation of Mickey Mouse, Ub Iwerks was essential to the creation of Mickey Mouse. The left panel is Walt looking over the shoulder of Ub Iwerks and staging of one of the scenes for the first Alice cartoons. These were done at the Laugh-O-Gram studios. Laugh-O-Grams didn't last too long. They were having financial problems. But at least they got their feet wet in producing their own animated films. This is a quick sketch showing a line out the theater door. And we see on the marquee Plane Crazy, and that was changed later on to the final illustration of Mickey's Steamroller. But this was, we had to show the impact on the first Mickey Mouse cartoons, what it had on the public back then, and what the merchandising potential happened that created this merchandising empire that started to support the Disney company and all their product. What's the next one? Okay, here's a sketch for the first Silly Symphony's skeleton dance. And this is late night, Ub Iwerks and Walt are dancing around in their, one of the, trying to figure out what are we going to do? What's the business happening in this graveyard with these skeletons coming to life? And so they're kind of rehearsing and running through a script, a very impromptu script on their own. Here is one of the first star animators in animation. I talked about Grim Natwick. This is Fred Moore. And Fred Moore, I think, started at the studio. He was probably around 17, 18 years old. I don't even think he completed high school. But he was a natural draftsman. He had an ability to create very appealing characters. And Walt saw that and immediately put work on Fred's first solo animation performance with The Three Little Pigs. Next is Disney Family Tree. The final piece of artwork centered on this film tree form with each of the characters at the end of each branch of film and how well it developed and how it built the Disney moniker, you know, with Mickey Mouse and Donald and Goofy and all the other characters that sprang up as they got successful. This one is just showing Disney had art classes with an instructor called Don Graham. They imported Don Graham over from Chenard Art Academy to help the artists get more power and more maturity in their drawings because Walt was getting them ready for their first feature film, Snow White. At the bottom is, oh, go back, yeah. On the right-hand side is a nervous story man presenting a storyboard to a very skeptical Walt leaning over with lit cigarette. The lit cigarette doesn't appear in the final drawing, in the final painting, unfortunately. And you know, funny stories about the story guys that had to pitch their sequences. My wife, Cammie, her dad had a very famous restaurant in Burbank that was kind of the watering hole for the story department at Walt Disney Studios. And these guys would come over there and engage in, you know, liquid courage before they had to pitch their sequence to Walt. Because it was an ordeal. Walt was very sharp and quick-minded and would race through, visually, he would already race through all the story sketches before the presenter, the sequence director, could even get through the first row. And Walt would say, dog ear that, get rid of that, why we got that business, that stinks, that works right there, save that sketch, but the other 49 sketches toss. And he was brutal. So, I mean, some story men got the shakes. You know, Walt was benevolent, but he was also ruthless with his creativity. This is the left side sketch is Walt presenting the story. He's pitching the story of Snow White to his crew. And then over on the right-hand side, we have a kind of a montage of Snow White, Seven Dwarfs, various drawings that represented the models and some of the art direction of the characters. What's the next one? Okay, so this is a story sketch of Walt during the strike that happened in 1941 and the impact that the war had on his studio. This is years later, after the war, after trying to get back into feature films. Walt is actually describing his vision for an amusement park, Disneyland, to his skeptical brother. Roy and Walt had an interesting relationship, you know. One was business, one was artistic. And, you know, there was a lot of conflict a lot of times, but they somehow achieved a balance and able to trade ideas back and forth. Roy would be in charge of raising the money for production, and Walt would be in charge of making the production happen with his artists. And together they formed an empire, and it worked. Here is Walt, a kind of a diagonal shot with him watching the construction of the Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland Anaheim. This would be circa around, maybe February, March of 1955, just before the park opened, I believe, in June. So they're ahead of the schedule so they can be ready for the opening, the televised opening of Disneyland. Once again, this is another version of Walt's vision of a park to his skeptical brother Roy. And here are some sketches for some other ideas. A young Walt, televised Walt on his show Disneyland during the early 50s, and another version of Walt with his hands in his pockets looking up at the now rising and finishing Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland. There's a sketch of him in his classroom sketching a pig. And this was a sketch that we never used that I got approval from Disney Publishing, but there was no place to put it. This would have been him reading a story to his two daughters. So here's some of the reference. Once the story sketches got approved, then I had to get ready to start pitching the ideas and showing them the final pencil layouts. And in order to do the pencil layouts, I had to know what I was drawing. So I had to go in and just dive into hundreds of photographs of automobiles, newsboy costumes, hats, apparel. What's the next slide? What Walt looked like at different stages of his life. What did he look like when he was 4 years old and 5 years old? What did he look like when he was a teenager? There he is on the left-hand side. In the middle is a photograph of my wife Cammie and I and our family. We visited Chicago a few years ago, and we went to Walt's house that was being restored on Tripp Avenue in Chicago. And so we took some pictures of the house from all different angles in case I need to use that in one of the illustrations. There was some sets of photographs of his residence in Kansas City, which is top right and bottom right. Pictures of him in his Red Cross uniform. I mean, he looked like a doughboy. It was an actual regulation army outfit he wore through his tenure for about a year there in Belgium and in France. And there are pictures of France following the destruction of the First World War. Walt got to, this is an interesting part here too, because this particular illustration was the only illustration I had a real problem with the executive command at Disney Publishing. I probably did that illustration, and it's the picture that's in the book shows Walt leaning against his ambulance with a very sober expression on his face. I don't know if we have that panel in this show. And the reason I guess it was important because it kind of sets the tone for him as artist and entertainer, because he saw firsthand the devastation of cities and families in Europe. It was horrible what happened during the First World War. He saw all of that, and he was part of the ambulance corps, so he saw a lot of the casualties. He saw the hunger. He saw the devastation and destruction of families. And so I think that put something in his heart that he needed as a entertainer and artistic powerhouse in the animation and film industry, and that was to be a merchant of hope. And I think, you know, the creation of Mickey Mouse and the success of Mickey Mouse didn't just happen by accident. The United States, as of the world, was in depression. People were homeless. People were out of jobs. They had no hope, and they needed to see someone that can rise them up, and Mickey Mouse helped do that, you know. That simple little cartoon character did so much, gave so much goodness and hope to a very, very suffering country, if not world. Other countries saw this character and took it, you know, and received it. And so he became kind of a merchant of hope for a lot of people. And because of that, it introduced animation to family communities worldwide. And it got embraced. And so it all starts out with him. I think something happened to him while he was serving in the Red Cross at that time. Afterwards, what's the next? This is like photos. I had several photos. Disney Archives was very gracious and helped me get photos that normally aren't available in magazines or books or any other source. Pictures of him with, I think this was Virginia Gray, the little girl who was in the first Alice cartoons. Alice cartoons, I think, were produced starting around 1923-24 up into 1927 for about 3 or 4 years. They did about 60 of these little short combination live-action animation shorts, the Alice cartoons, with different themes and different little characters. And then on the right-hand side is a publicity still from Bambi of him feeding a baby fawn. Story, this is photo of Walt with Russian composer Igor Stravinsky and one of his storymen looking at artwork for Rite of Spring sequence in Fantasia. And then there are marquees there, 2 double marquees on the right-hand side, just to see what a theater entrance looked like back in the 30s and 40s, because that became instrumental in one of the illustrations for Mickey's marquee. Picture of Walt, early 30s, picture of the Disneyland Sleeping Beauty's castle entrance in Disneyland Park, Anaheim. This is our next door neighbor. He was posing as a young 6-year-old Walt drawing the neighbor's horse. So I wanted to get a really nice sunlit day with him in little coveralls and trying to look, you know, of that era and just setting up you know, at that particular angle. And way in the beginning, when I first started showing these layout sketches, they said, okay, when you get into the color sections, what's the style of this book going to be? And the first person I thought of was American illustrator Norman Rockwell. And I like his style. Norman Rockwell can be very detailed sometimes and very impressionistic, but as a painter, I really revered and respect his talent and his ability and his style. So I was basically pointing to Norman Rockwell when I said, this is the way I want to do it. Norman Rockwell, when he would do his Saturday morning post illustrations, would do kind of the same approach. He would go and get neighborhood kids or people that he knew down the street at the local grocery store or hardware store, get them in costume and photograph them as reference to see how the anatomy worked, how the folds of the costume worked, so you can just feel the substance in what he created as a painting. I wanted to do the same thing. So we have Griffin from down the street, Griffin Goodman, and his friend James, and I dressed them in cutaway coats, top hats, and they posed as Walt Pfeiffer and Walt Disney doing a talent show. And there was the pencil sketch that came first, then the photographic reference. This is my son, this is our son, Caleb. He's posing as a young Walt Disney, daydreaming in his chair at the Kansas City ad agency, thinking about all the characters that he wants to create. This is a almost finished pencil layout of a young Walt riding one of the pigs on his farm in Marceline, Missouri. He always regarded as his days in Marceline as his happiest. You know, this is the him forming some of his relationships with the environment, with his family, and with him daydreaming about things that he would love to create as in form of drawing or in form of a cartoon. This is the illustration I was telling you about that got revised, I don't know, 8 or 9 times. I can't remember, I lost count. This one, you know, he's doing a drawing of a doughboy caricature cartoon on the side of an American tank. Guys are laughing. It's kind of a cut-up sequence. It's fun. They didn't like that. They wanted it to be more sober. And I think that was, even though, you know, I was resisting, at the end of it all, I agree with them. I think it was the right choice. I'm glad they pushed me in that direction. And like, you know, animation, you know, doing book illustration is a collaborative art form. You have to work with, you know, your editor and all the other people that are creating alongside you. And like animation, it's the same process. You need the help and vision of other artists that you can respect on either side of you, because the direction you might be going in your animated scene or in your illustration might necessarily be the best one. So, you know, I was able to learn wisdom and discernment during this project. Anyway, the direction that they went, I thought was the better one. Here's a more elaborate illustration using my son Caleb as the photographic reference. This is a little tableau of Walt's hand pointing to the Mickey that he really likes. Now, lower hand would have been that of iWorks. And once again, you know, I had to get into detail about what does an animation desk look like. The sliding calibrated bars, peg bars that are on the bottom and the top. All these little tiny little details are very important, especially to people who are into animation or connoisseurs or animation nerds like myself and Trey and Phil, because you want to see that detail. It makes, there's a thing that I refer to in animation, the willing suspension of disbelief. Do you believe that these animated drawings are real, and can you identify and root for that character? Well, the same kind of goes for illustration. I want to take you into the picture. Do you believe that it's real? Are you captivated by the detail and what it's saying? That's okay. No, go to the next one. Go to the next. This was a panel that didn't get approved. It didn't make it into the book, but Walt in the back is complimenting a young female artist, could have been Mary Blair, about her work that he sees on the pad, that she's drawing a small deer, probably during the time the production of Bambi was going on, probably around circa 1940, 41. This one is a panel showing a very depressed Walt with the strike and picket signs going outside his window during the strike of 1941. He felt betrayed, he was hurt. You know, I don't think Walt handled the situation all that great, to tell you the truth, because, you know, he was rewarding his key artists, but he wasn't looking after the welfare of some of the people that were working in ink and paint, and some of the in-betweeners and art staff that were on the lower rung of production. We've seen this one. You can go on to the next one. Okay, so here's, once the pencil layouts, how are we doing time-wise? 12 minutes? Okay. Once the pencil panels and layouts got approved, then we went on to what I call color comps, which is the first color impression of what that scene looks like. So here is Walt, 6-year-old Walt, in the grass, drawing the neighbor's horse. Here's the one of the talent show. You know, and trying to, you know, the psychology of colors is kind of important to me, and I'm not gifted when it comes to color theory. I've learned color theory from professors at Art Center who knew a heck of a lot more than I did. I just kind of went with what I thought would be kind of fun. Being that they were in a theater venue, red velvet curtains in back of them, talent show placard on the easel, them in their, you know, little Charlie Chaplin suits, their little outfits. I thought it worked. And being that I had to get it approved by, you know, Disney Publishing, they saluted, so I went with that. So it worked. Here's another one, color idea for Silly Symphony Skeleton Dance. So the right side represents the black and white film that they used at the time. Skeleton Dance was in black and white, and then it merges with the color, the low-key colors of iWorks, dancing around, trying to get some ideas and laughing up, you know, their ideas for Skeleton Dance with Walt. Here's the multiplane camera. You know, of all the things to do reference on, man, this one was the most tedious because there's a lot of detail on this thing, the gears and the mechanism and the plats and the platens and the glass and the poles and the on and on and on. So it's, a lot of reference was needed on that. So this is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs sneaking into the multiplane camera room while the camera process is going on. We have animation cell checkers, we have animation camera operators, we have a final checker here with a smock on. So, I mean, it was a very orchestrated and organized system that they had for getting that artwork photographed with all the calibrated camera moves. Everything was extremely labor intensive. So, and it's funny because the president of the company, when I first started in 1973, was Card Walker. He basically took the reins after Walt died and was the head of the entire company, Disney company. And he started out as a multiplane camera operator. So here is, this is the color comp for Walt, smiling, arms folded, very proud of the construction of his Sleeping Beauty castle. This panel did not make it into the show. The color comp is not in the show because this is with Glenn Keane. I gave this panel, this color comp, to Glenn Keane as thanks for referring this job to me from Disney Publishing. So he's got that piece. Here's a final, the final panel. This is the painting that's in the gallery here of young Walt sketching the neighbor's horse. And this one is Fred Moore with Walt looking over his shoulder at his 3 little pig drawings on his animation desk.
Can I tell them that you,
Sure.
Don, graciously donated this painting, the study of this painting to Walt Disney University?
Yeah, so that you can see that on a daily basis. Compliments of Andy Bean and Brad Conde.
Yeah, it's very generous of you.
Well, you know what? You guys are so gracious inviting me a second time. I'm hoping there's a third and a fourth, and if we can do this as an annual thing, it would be wonderful. Yeah. Disney Classics is the title of this, so it shows I've already shown Snow White in the multiplane camera room, so these are the 4 other prominent feature films that were in the golden age of Disney classic animation. So we have Pinocchio, and underneath it is Mickey Mouse as the Sorcerer's Apprentice and Fantasia, and then over to the right of that is Dumbo, and above that is Bambi. And here's the final color painting of Walt's vision for an amusement park, and trying to give the vision to his brother, arms folded, still slightly skeptical, to his brother Roy. Oh, go back that one illustration. And it's important to show, you know, like a lot of this idea, I mean, I was trying to show the connection between Walt Disney had a miniature railroad that ran around the property of his house in Holmby Hills in Southern California. And he's, you know, he's got 3 kids in the back boxcar that he's riding around. He loved to give kids a ride on his, and this is part of the idea that was feeding the idea of an amusement park. And I had to go back in all of the, pictorial reference. I had to go and just, oh man, build up a library of probably a couple of hundred photographs of as it existed in 1955 when it opened. Because the marquees for rides changed, the topography changed, all changes. And I wanted to be faithful to recreate how the park looked when they opened. Is that it?
That's it.
We're done.
You made it.
We're done. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you.
We have about 15 minutes left.
Can we show the little teaser clip? So where are you, Phil? Phil, you've got it right there, right? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to say a few words about this? Do you have anything that you want to say? This is my partner Phil Ernest and I. We kind of formed a partnership, an idea about 2.5 years ago to my wife Cammie and myself about passing on the knowledge that the 9 old men gave to me to the next generation of artists, which would be you guys. And you are the hope for the future of animation, as I say to my classes over at Lipscomb. I mean, and there's such an excitement about the art form right now, and there's so much work left to be done. So I hope the tutorial series, there's lots of tutorial series out there. On YouTube, online, I mean, they're all over the place. And it's like, look at all of them. Glean the information, choose and pick what you want to look at, you know, and what drives you and excites you. You may want to be a background artist. You may want to be a storyboard artist. You may want to be a character designer. You may want to design an animated video game. You may want to animate on a feature film. All these things are available to you. So I just ask, give my Pomeroy Art Academy tutorial series a chance, because we're going to be showcasing special animated effects, 2D and digital? Digital animation on Maya, traditional animation, 2D animation on pencil and paper. The clip I'm showing you right now, stand up for a moment, Trey. Well, the opening scenes were animated by my associate animator, Trey Bailey. And we wanted to kick off our first 15 lessons revisiting the idea of what Walt Disney did back in the 50s when he did his Disneyland show. Donald Duck would jump on his desk and start to quack and talk to Walt about what they were going to show in their program. This is the kind of same thing. Bring in kind of the magic to an interrelation between the teacher and the animated creation and into, you know, the screens and homes of viewers and subscribers. We probably have 160 lessons scheduled to do. This will be an ongoing series that'll keep just growing and growing and growing. We hope to get into animation writing. We hope to get into the business of animation and how to pitch your own series, your own franchise, character design, advanced character design, comics, puppetry, origami, all kinds of other things. It'll be in 3 tiers. The first tier will address just brand new starting artists, ages 8 to 12. The middle tier will be addressing yourselves and high school or advanced high school artists, high school to college. And then the third tier, professional. And we'll just want to touch all the bases. I plan, my producer partner and I, we plan to go to California sometime soon in the near future and do maybe 6 or 7 different lessons. One of the lessons we want to do is about the lost art of inking and painting, Disney style. This is a disappearing art form. We want to do a lesson series on cleanup. 2D hand-drawn animation cleanup doesn't exist anymore. And it's a shame because there's plenty of room for both digital and 2D. So anyway, let's show that clip. Hi everybody, welcome to Pomeroy Art Academy. Hi, I'm your instructor, John Pomeroy. So, Tig, what are we learning today?
We're gonna learn about animation equipment. You know, your pencils, your paper, all the stuff you need to animate.
That sounds great, Tig. Let's get started. So these are the materials that you're going to be using to start your animation. We've got white bond paper that is punched with holes, and these holes correspond to the pegs that you'll be using on your animation drawing boards. They keep the paper stationary while you're drawing on it and when you shoot it. Otherwise, if you don't have it on pegs, the drawings tend to shimmy around and become very jittery when you photograph them. So this is very important to make sure you have punched paper. Next are pencils. And these are the tools usually to capture the drawing on your paper. I usually use 2B or 4B pencils. They're my favorites. The 4B I've come to really like. It's a nice creamy line, easy to erase, and it's just a handy, good line to start using in your first animation scenes. Next are erasers. I've got an assortment of these hard rubber erasers. These are the smaller erasers that fit on the end of your pencil. And then kneaded erasers. They can be stretched and shaped into any size you want. They're really easier on the surface of the paper than the hard rubber ones. The hard rubber, after you erase it a while, it tends to kind of bruise and roughen the surface of the paper, which makes it hard to draw on. But the kneaded eraser, you can kind of form into a little roll, and you can roll it over the surface of the page and lift the graphite or lead off the surface and not ruin the surface of the paper. And then last are the pegs, animation pegs that correspond to the holes that are punched in your paper. And these come in either plastic or metal, and we'll give you some information about sources where you can get these materials. And the most important piece of equipment is our animation drafting board. And we'll mount the pegs on the very bottom here with masking tape, like so. 2 pieces on the top, 1 on the bottom. And then we'll take a page of our animation paper and slip the punch part of the pegs over the pegs themselves, and we're ready to go. I'm going to show you how to create an in-between drawing. But before I do, let me explain to you what an in-between is. In animation, the animator creates extremes to define the action that he's animating. Extreme drawings, and I'll give you an example. Suppose my character is looking from left to right. this would be an extreme drawing to the left, and then as he turns facing the right, this would be an extreme drawing. So we would have two extremes. An in-between is the transitional drawing that goes in between each of those extremes to help smooth out the action. So I would go from left, in between, and then look to the right for my action. So that's what an in-between is. Now, in creating an in-between, it's important that you learn how to flip. And flipping is a technique that I learned when I first started at Disney Studios many years ago. It's the idea of placing the drawing that you're working on at the top of the pile of drawings and being able to alternatingly flip from the bottom drawing to your drawing and then to the top extreme drawing that you're in-betweening into. So I'll give you an example. So what we'll do is imagine two sets of fingers that you're going to be using. You'll place one drawing in between ring finger and middle finger, and then the drawing that you're working on between index finger and thumb. And that way you can flip from bottom drawing number 1 to your drawing to the next in-between that you're in-betweening into, drawing number 9. And then if you do it in quick succession, you can see the action happening as you are creating that in-between drawing. And it's important because you want to make sure that the action works smoothly, that the volumes are maintained so that the shape doesn't get huge or too small to make that transitional shape. So this is flipping. I would love for you to practice this because it becomes very important to be able to do this as you are drawing. So that is flipping. Next, I'm going to show you how to actually create the in-between. So what we'll do is we will take this drawing off. We've got a drawing number 1 and a drawing number 5. We'll take a clean piece of paper, put on the top, and what we're going to do is create a brand new in-between between drawings number 1 and this drawing number 5. So I'm going to begin by sort of outlining, and what I'd like to do is work from largest shapes to the smallest shapes. So imagine the first shape that I'm going to try to in-between is the actual head of this character, which is just basically a ball shape. So I'm going to basically try to figure out my perimeters to make that ball shape. I do it with like little series of dots on the page so I can get myself an idea of where that drawing needs to be. If I look through this paper, which is slightly translucent, you can see through it. I know that the drawing number 5 is right there, the side of his face, and I can see that the drawing of the other side of his face on drawing 1 is right there. So I want to be right in the middle. So there is a rough perimeter of my new drawing, and we will call that drawing preview. that's like, you know, now to you seasoned college level animation majors, you already know all this stuff. But I mean, for the entry level, to someone that has no iPad, no experience, and no knowledge, but a lot of desire and passion about the art form and wants to get to know, this will be the answer to them. I wish I had this when I was 13 or 14 years old. So this information, you know, will be available to the young, you know nothing novice artist that wants to get interested in animation. You know, and if they don't have a animation board, they can make one out of cardboard. We give them a template that they can use and measure off and cut to size for their own use. All they have to do is we give them information about sources for pencils, for sources for animation pegs and paper. So it's going to be very informative. And you know, we're hoping that, you know, the first, we're looking towards a launch date of late in November. So those first 15 lessons will go out there. And we will keep reintroducing the 3 characters that you saw. It's Walt, it is Twinkle, and it is Tig. So we hope to make them, you know, add them as we get further on with our lessons. I think that's it. Questions, Q&A?
Questions, and also, John, gallery show, you know, the paintings over there if you want a signed book after that.
We've got books, we've got hardbound, paperbound. I've got flyers on the Pomeroy Art Academy that you can take, and I've got business cards, so how you can get a hold of me on Instagram and follow me online. So
would you
Oh,
open
that's
this up to questions? You guys, I mean, you know,
What
John's
questions?
got
Come on.
lots of experience.
Yes, sir.
in the industry, whatever.
I have like two questions, but first off, like, what got you into animation?
Puppetry. So at age 3, my mother gave me her dining room table to play with clay, and I would recreate movies. I remember recreating, remember an old movie, Brad, that came out in the early 60s called Time Machine with Rod Taylor? So I recreated the cave or the Morlocks, these creatures down there, and I recreated all that in clay. So I figured what I was learning was I love to tell stories with clay. So I guess I could have easily gone in the direction of stop motion animation, but I didn't. That transferred over to puppetry, and then from puppetry over to animation. When I was about 13, 14 years old, I wanted to make the perfect replica of Pinocchio. So I went to the Los Angeles Public Library downtown, got information on Pinocchio, found a little storybook, but I also found this other book called The Art of Walt Disney, and I started reading that cover to cover, 1 time, 2 times. I read that book a dozen times, and I forgot about puppets, and I wanted to create animation. I actually wanted to become a background artist. And I went through 2 years of Art Center College of Design to get my portfolio up. It took me 3 portfolios to finally get accepted into the trainee program. So I want to urge you, please don't get discouraged if the first time or the second time or the third time or even the 4th time you get turned down. Keep trying, because you'll get there. I mean, it took me 3 times. So, but I wanted to paint backgrounds, and when I started the first day at Disney Studios, I said, I want to be a background artist, and they said, okay, you'll be a better background artist if you learn the principles of animation, the way we teach them. I said, hey, I'll do anything you guys want me to do. And so I went through my first training, and my mentor was one of the 9 old men, Eric Larson. And he was very patient and kind. Man, he just shared all kinds of knowledge with us. And after the first 4 weeks, I was up for review, and they would look at my personal tests. I designed 2 characters and animated them. And Eric invited me into his projection room. He's got a projector called a Moviola, and we looked at my animation for the first time. And something happened. I saw these crummy little drawings that I had created moving and acting and coming to life. And I got bit by the animation bug. Threw away the paintbrushes, forgot about background art. I wanted to be an animator. It was like nothing I've ever experienced. And it's a very unique art form. Imagine yourself, it's a very godly art form, creating something from nothing, giving breath to empty pages of paper. It's amazing. So that's what got me started. Yeah. Next question, who else? Yes.
What was the most fun or exciting thing you did as an
The scene that never got shown, the X-rated. The scene, there was a 30-foot scene that Glenn and I did. Glenn Keane and I had offices adjoining. They put us together because we had large crews and an enormous amount of footage. There was a scene, it's in the movie, but Captain John Smith is wearing a shirt. It's a scene where he is shirtless, and he tries to get her into trouble, and it could cause a conflict between the crew that was with John Smith and her Indian family. But it was a wonderful scene. He says, when will I see you again? I don't know. Move around him, and he's without a shirt. So it got very sensual. And at the screenings, suddenly they become aware, we can't show John Smith like this, man. This is the next thing of them, lighting up a cigarette the next morning. It's like, no, we can't do that. So they said, John, put a shirt on him. Put a shirt on him. And so that's what happened. I think I posted, Trey, did I post the shirtless scene on Instagram?
I don't know if you have it may be the shirtless scene.
I think it is. I think. Yeah, I think some of the key extremes. So that's why you should please follow me on Instagram, because I post a lot of stuff that normally you don't get to see. You know, it doesn't make it into the special director's cut. But yeah, that was one of the special moments. I mean, there were so many special moments, but that one was really, I mean, Glenn and I had a relationship that goes back to Rescuers when he started out. Actually, before that, because I became one of the recruiting animators that Disney sent out back in 1974 and 75 to look at the work of animation students like yourself at Cal Arts. And Glenn was one of those students. He was just graduating and was so excited about getting into animation. So one of the first things that happened when he got hired and he got past the approval process, he was my in-betweener. Did rotten in-betweens. Because he would like draw, just But you know what? He moved on and away, and he became, you know, a tower of strength in the animation industry. Same with Ron Clements, was my in-betweener for about 2 months, and then he went on. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Who's next? Yes.
While working at Disney, were there times where like you felt very frustrated?
Yeah.
And like, can you name one time?
Oh, sure. Oh, easily. Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, my first animation assignment. So we were, I mean, that was a labor of love. They promoted 4 animators out of the trainee program, like myself, into animating on Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. And at the end of it, Disney got into some hot water with the local 839 Animators Union because they didn't promote us. We weren't officially animators, union animators that animated on that short. That's a no-no. So they told us, I'm afraid we can't give you animation credit, we can't make you animators. Are you kidding me? And we worked slave for over a year. I mean, we were not just disappointed, we were furious. And a couple of weeks later, after a great deal of thinking and I'm sure somebody went up to bat with us. I'm sure some of the 9 old men, I'm sure Frank Thomas and John Lounsbury, who was the director of Winnie the Pooh, went to bat for us. And they convinced, our production manager at the time was a man named Don Duckwall. Donald Duckwall. And he finally conceded. He said, okay, we'll give them animation credit and we'll promote them to full animators. So we got what we wanted. And of course, you know, it was a nice pat on the back from them because we felt we had done a good job and they were rewarding us. So, you know, once again, we were passionate about being there at Disney Studios. But there was a moment that we were very angry at Disney for doing that to us. So, yeah. And it happens in animation, you know. You go through your frustrations, you go through your joys. You know, it's kind of it never gets boring. Let's say that. It always keeps very interesting, sometimes very dramatic. Any other questions? Okay, yes?
So across all the different films that you've worked on, like Treasure Planet, Atlantis, Pocahontas, all of them have so many different art styles and the way the characters are drawn.
Yes.
Was there ever any difficulty adjusting to those art styles?
Sometimes.
How did you go about it?
Sometimes. You know, it's an interesting question because each one of the pictures in the Renaissance of Disney, I mean, when Bluth and Pomeroy and Goldman left Disney Studios, it caused them to kind of reinvent themselves. And they did so in a magnificent way. I mean, they started creating Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Little Mermaid, and then everything after that was a home run. Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Tarzan, everything. And each one of those movies is interesting because they would adopt a artistic language based or influenced by an artist or a look. And the examples are, for Aladdin, they were influenced by Al Hirschfeld. You know who Al Hirschfeld is? Very famous caricaturist out of New York. He did caricatures for movies from the 1920s on till about, I think he passed away in 2000. Eric Goldberg, who was the supervising animator in charge of the genie in Aladdin, he says, yeah, Al Hirschfield was his influence on that. And Hercules was Ron Searle, British cartoonist that they adopted the look of. With Atlantis, it was Mike Mignola, who was the creator of Hellboy. And he came in, took our designs that we had worked out for a year, including my design of Milo, and just kind of reconfigured them with this very angular style. And at first, I didn't like it. You know, the fingers were cut off, the fingernails were triangular, it had a lot of angularity and hard edge. They wanted to depart from the cutesy, curvy, cute look of Disney and do something more dynamic, more hard-edged. And so after about a month of drawing this new Milo character, I thought, I love this. I loved it so much to this day it's hard to break away from it. I still draw like that. So, I mean, each Pocahontas, they love the illustrations of a 20s painter illustrator by the name of Joseph Leyendecker. And he became kind of the template, the graphic universe that we worked with that influenced the production of Pocahontas. He was influential with Glenn developing Pocahontas and with me with Captain John Smith. So, yes. I hope that, did I answer your question? Yeah, good. And then, yes.
What inspired the art look for Kita?
What
inspired the art look for Kita?
Oh, well, Mike Mignola, of course. And there was a Japanese animator at the Paris studio who animated her. Oh, jeez. Yoshi. I can't remember Yoshi's last name. Very dynamic animator. He worked with Glenn Keane on Tarzan and became the supervising animator for, no, take that back. He did Hilga. I'm sorry. Randy Haycock is the one who was the supervising animator on Kita. That would be an interesting question for him. Because, you know, by the time the animator receives his assignment, there's already been an immense amount of artwork. One of the influences, I'm sure, for Randy was a man named John Watkiss. He's no longer with us. He passed away about 5 years ago. An exceptional illustrator, anatomical draftsman, and painter. He taught at the Royal Academy in London for a couple of years. Disney hired him in the late 80s, early 90s to do art direction and concept art for Atlantis, Tarzan, and I think Emperor's New Groove. Was it Empire of the Sun? Yeah. So, I mean, 3 or 4 feature films that he was instrumental on developing the look. And I think he developed Princess Kita. So, and then we had, of course, Mike Mignola, who came in and developed it further with a hard edge and the way her hair was and all that. The weapons, the costume, the headdresses, all that stuff. So it informed, it gave us kind of a graphic alphabet to work with as far, and that was reflective in the environments, the equipment, the characters, everything was spoken in that graphic language. Yeah, okay. Yes?
So, yesterday when I went up to your booth, I remember like watching your flyer.
Yeah.
And there was like a scene or like a picture of a animated video game.
Yeah.
Or Dungeons.
Dragon's Lair.
Yeah. I want to know like your side, like how. Since it was like right there, I want to like know how it went for that.
That has an interesting history. Why, do you want to hear it? Dragon's Lair was the placeholder at the end of Secret of NIMH. Secret of NIMH was our first feature film that we did as an independent company, Don Bluth Productions. It didn't do well at the box office. MGM, United Artists, didn't know how to handle an animated film, and the distribution went very badly. And that summer, we were up against another film, E.T. So it's like nobody saw The Secret of NIMH. Very few people did. However, it has an amazing fan base years later. And one of the fans that came to us was Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg was a big fan of Secret of NIMH because he thought that type of animation had disappeared. The attention to dewdrops and minutia, the animated effects, the performances, everything. He said, we've got to make a film together. So that transpired eventually 2 or 3 years later into An American Tale and Land Before Time. So he said, we'll part company right now, but my aim is to find the script and the story that we can work together on as an animated feature film. Great. So in the meantime, we were kind of stranded without any kind of a product to work on or to sustain our small crew. And then from Southern California in San Diego, we were approached by this digital game developer by the name of Rick Dyer, and he came to us with this idea about this interactive game in a medieval castle with this knight who goes in to rescue a princess who's being held captive by this dragon. And it turned out to be Dragon's Lair. And the focal point of this, what kicked it off for Rick Dyer and his people, is that there was a brand new technology that just came out called Laserdisc. And it was able to random access certain scenes, so you could create your own movie, technically. An interactive arcade game is what happened. Now, up to that point, all that existed was things like Pong, Nolan Bushnell, who developed Pong, and then Pac-Man. So this is a theater experience where you're standing at a console and you're watching an animated feature going by, and you pick and choose the way you can go. And the way you could go would determine if you were killed or if you proceeded ahead to the treasure room and rescued the princess. So that was kind of what happened during '83 and '84 as we were waiting for Steven Spielberg to find that particular project that we were going to work together. And we did 3 games. And they're available right now, I think, on PlayStation 4. PlayStation 5 has released the trilogy, which is Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp, and Space Ace were the 3 games that we developed during that period of time. And while we were doing that, we employed a lot of people out of Cal Arts and other local art schools. And it's amazing, how much talent came through our hallways and then went off on their own to develop either their own studios, their own franchises, and on and on. But Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, those were the properties. Huh?
They're available on the App Store, I think, as well.
Yeah, they are. They are. Even being developed as a movie as we speak. Yeah. So and that's turned into a franchise of promise over the last 25 years. In the industry, they refer to that as a cash cow, but it's like people embrace that. Every time I go to a convention, guys that walk by, oh, my Dragon's Lair, I lost more quarters at that game because it's pretty challenging. I got through the first room. And I'm one of the producers. I got killed immediately, always. Any? Are we good?
Yeah, we gotta wrap it up.
Can I, one more question?
I'm sorry, but I always like doing character design.
Yeah.
But I also I'm also into storyboard and directing and stuff like that. But to me, it's not. I don't know. I just feel some sense of happiness, pride when I create a character. I don't seem nothing like you say, kind of godly form. But my question is, if you start since I've been creating characters I don't know how long, but you ever get to that point where you run out of ideas of what kind of character to create and how do you get past that?
You look for inspiration elsewhere. You just try something. There was a moment back in the early '90s, and my wife can attest to this, where I felt burnt out because I was wearing the producer's hat so tight I couldn't do what I loved to do, which was create with a pencil. So that was a moment. Remember I told you that when I saw my first pencil test, I threw away the paintbrushes? Well, I returned the paintbrushes. I got back into painting, and that refreshed me as an artist. I got excited again about animation, about creating, about doing character design. Those characters that you see, those 3 little characters, I designed those during that time of resurgence. I did a collection of characters, one collection called Dynamites, another collection called 333 Elf Place. So if you feel stale or you're stuck, turn your attention to something else that might inspire you, and then you can return refreshed. It might be sculpting, it might be game design, it might be storybook illustration. You never know. That's my thought. You know, that's kind of that's a remedy for growing stale. And it happens. It does. You know, I've been involved with storyboarding for the last 8 years with Disney TV. I've worked on Sophia the First for 3.5 years, then developed all the characters for Elena of Alvalor, Princess Elena, and then worked on Fancy Nancy. And at a time, I could have kept going, but now I'm animating and doing character design on Looney Tunes. Bugs Bunny, Elmer Fudd, Porky Pig, Daffy Duck. It's great. So if you're able to turn your attention to one other thing periodically just to refresh yourself, do that. Okay? Guys, it's been great talking with you. Come up and get a flyer on the Pomeroy Art Academy or a card with information about how to follow me on Instagram. Thank you so much. It's been great. Thank you.